welcome to Travel and Transport in a Low Carbon World. I'm John Spires from Hyder, and I've spent the last 30 odd years going around the world trying to help people design transport systems that improve mobility. Because we believe that mobility is a great enabler both of economic and social development. So what is going to happen in a lower carbon world when the majority of the fuel that we currently use to aid that mobility is generated by some form of carbon? I have on the platform today, I've got Nick Code from National Express, David Bellamy from the Food and Drink Federation, and Craig Sears-Black from EcoTrack. And I'll introduce them more formally when they come up to speak. Each of my fellow speakers is going to talk about how a low-carbon world is going to affect their business and what they're currently doing and what they're anticipating doing on trying to generate opportunities from a low-carbon world and also trying to align their businesses to it. But what I'd like to do, first of all, is consider some of the social and economic issues that we all need to face when we start looking at how we're all going to travel in a low-carbon world. Some of the facts to start with, which I think other people have quoted earlier. The UK Climate Change Act is committing us to reducing by 80% from the 1990 baseline our greenhouse gas emissions. And transport actually accounts for 21% of all those greenhouse gas emissions. And nearly 90% of that is from our road-based transport. So first of all, a question to you all. How many of you came here today by car, either as a driver or as a passenger? Probably about a third of you, which is very good. How many of you who drove have got a hybrid car? Nobody. Good, good. So we've got, actually a third is very good, given that more than 80% of travel is normally by car. The UK produces about 2% of the world's greenhouse gas. So doing the maths, it means that if we could reduce our transport emissions by 50%, we would change the world emissions by 0.2%. So that's, if you like, looking on the gloomy side. On the bright side, if we could change our transport by 50%, reduce the carbon, we'd actually reduce UK emissions by 10%, and we'd be doing a lot better. So what can we do, actually, in terms of low carbon? The opportunity for UK PLC is that, in fact, the technology, vehicle technology, to look at how we might produce better hybrid, better electric vehicles, biodiesel or hydrogen fuel cell type cars, actually provide an opportunity for the UK to improve our manufacturing and move forward into high technology industries. Of course, one of the issues with doing that is that that is actually providing alternatives to the way we currently travel. And one of the issues that we've got is that everybody talks about providing alternatives which will allow us to carry on doing what we're doing. And one of the questions is, actually, should we be carrying on doing what we're doing? Is mobility a right? Everything we do in terms of our current lifestyle is built upon the fact that mobility is a right and we can travel how we want to. And it is deemed that if you look at the media, the more you travel to exotic locations, the more you have very nice cars and the more you have houses in the countryside, that's actually deemed to be successful. And therefore, we need to actually look at our lifestyles as well as looking at all the technology that will help us to improve the way that we use carbon and hopefully reduce it. Because if you look at smarter travel, what we should all be trying to do is actually, first of all, travel less. That's the smartest travel of all. Can you actually avoid traveling? Because it takes time. The next thing we should do is actually travel by non-mechanized means if we can, which are healthier, walking, cycling. Then the third choice is then travelling by mechanized modes, which should be more sustainable. So it should be rail or bus or things that use less carbon. The last alternative should be travelling by private car, but actually it's most people's first alternative. And as I say, coming back to, we all believe mobility is a right. How many people here think that mobility is a right, that you have a right to be able to travel? Probably more than half of you. It'd be interesting in the questions and answers to actually say why you believe you have a right to travel and why it isn't actually a gift. One of the problems we have is that our land use, the whole development pattern that we've built up over the last 20 years, has actually encouraged us to travel and made it more difficult to provide for that travel by more sustainable modes. How many of you live right in the middle of an urban area? How many of you live in a rural or villagey type area? So more people live in a rural area than live in an urban area. How many of you have good access to public transport? Again, probably about a third of you. How many people have no alternative but to travel by private car for most of their journeys? Oh, surprisingly few of you actually, compared with the average. But what we've done is we've built up a land use system which encourages people to travel. We've got out-of-town shopping centres, we've got out-of-town business parks where people work. We've built up large housing estates on the edges of villages, which are very difficult to serve. And that, as I say, most of you now believe if you live somewhere like that, you have a right to travel because you've moved there, your children are at school there, therefore I have a right to use my car. So what we seem to be doing is saying, we have cars, we have a right to a car. What we'll do is put in more and more technology solutions for the low carbon world. Actually, we won't look at how our lifestyle changes that we must make to actually not only reduce the travel that we do, but also help the carbon because we won't be traveling as much. So going forward, I think it isn't only a case of improving technology and putting in all these wonderful things like hybrids and electric and all the rest of it. It's actually more about us all addressing our lifestyle and accepting that, in my opinion, mobility isn't a right, and that do we really want to go faster and further all the time?